everyone. So thank you for coming out to hear my talk on a Monday. I'm surprised that there's so many people who have nothing better to do on a Monday night. What I'll do, I'll just talk a little bit about how I see travel photography, and then just share with you some of the things that I've learned on my own journey, making pictures around the world. So, really, my journey began when I was quite young. I was lucky enough that I had a mom who also enjoyed traveling, and she got me traveling. So this is me at the age of 4. What I think is my first international trip to the great kingdom of Walt Disney. I was also lucky enough that when I actually started to work, when I had a real job that used to pay the bills before I got into photography, that I was able to travel with that job as well. So I got to interesting places, and got as far as going to China. And then somewhere in between those two pictures is where my love of photography developed, and my whole journey on doing some travel photography really began. So what the heck is travel photography?
Yeah, boy.
Right? So, I mean, I think when we first think of when we hear the word travel photography, we think of, the iconic images. And if I told you, think of Venice, you'd probably think of something to do with gondolas and these type of things. If I said, picture Rome, you'd probably picture this. Or you'd actually picture, what I know you're picturing is the Colosseum, right? But I don't actually have a picture of the Colosseum. If I said picture Paris, you'd probably picture something like this, right? So the Eiffel Tower, or the Notre Dame before the big fire, and she still had a spire. And China, maybe something like this. So these are the real iconic pictures of places that when you think about a destination, these are the images that come to mind. And these are great images, and it's important that when you travel, you get some of these images. But because they're so iconic, it's really difficult to get really unique images of these places. And travel photography is so much more than just getting these iconic postcard images. Right? Travel photography really is one of the genres of photography that really encompasses so many different things. Take, for instance, architecture. So architecture really tells us a lot about a place and the people. I mean, an image like this shows you a bit about their beliefs, about their fears, about their superstitions, about their handicraft and their detailed attention. It tells you about the way they look at preserving their history and their buildings. Something like this shows you the way people think about themselves. I mean, obviously this is not regular architecture. This is really cutting edge, futuristic, innovative architecture. So it reflects on the people and the places that you're visiting. Architecture could also tell you about where we are. So are we in a big city with traffic and pollution, or are we driving down a rural road somewhere with white picket fences and mailboxes on the side of the road? Looking at an image like this, we know that this is not Miami or Toronto or Port of Spain. This is not Georgetown or Cape Town or Bridgetown. So architecture is one of the things that really helps you capture a sense of where you are and where you're at in your journey.
Where is this?
That is Rome. Right, so people. So when I first started off in photography, and we travel photography, I was trying to capture those iconic images, and I hated people. People were the bane of my existence because you're trying to get that shot, and people kept walking in and out of your frame. But eventually, after a while, I started to realize that people actually do also help tell part of the story. An image like this, are the people, what are they wearing? Are they all dressed the same? Are they all in business suits? Or is it a mix of things? How do they go about their business? Are they hustling, or are they more relaxed, like you find in the Caribbean? Is it a mix of young people or old people? When you stop to shoot them, do they shoo you away, or do they ignore you, or do they pose for you? So all these things help tell the story about the people and the places that you're visiting.
Mr. Trump.
Right? So sometimes the people actually help to make the picture. So anybody who's been to St. Martin knows this famous airport at Mango Beach, where the planes come in really low and right over the people. But without the kid in the foreground, the image is just a picture of a plane landing, which is not so exciting. Sometimes the images don't have to be of really anything in particular, but just some interesting people that you meet along the way. Maybe an interesting place with some interesting light. Or you can take pictures of people in the same country and just show different sides of the culture. So the image on the left is of a teenage girl in Harajuku, Japan, where they dress up in these anime costumes, and there's a big anime culture, and they get together and they lime and they eat and they talk and they walk around. And the image on the right is of the guy who owned the restaurant that I had breakfast in every day while I was in Cuba. So really, same culture but very different kind of images. So landscapes. So landscapes are another just subgenre of photography. And this is one of the really popular ones because really this is taking a picture of the place, you know, in the widest sense of the word. One of the things that I had been taught early on is always try to include something in your image that kind of gives a person a sense of the place. You know, without that there, it could be just a grassy hilltop anywhere. But when you put that little thing there, it tells you it's somewhere near a castle. The weather tells you it's somewhere in the Caribbean. It's actually a shot in Old San Juan. And if you've ever been to Puerto Rico, this is a very iconic kind of thing, you know. So just that little thing tells you where you are. Similarly, this shot. So this is an image of the Huangpu River in Shanghai. And it could be anywhere, but you know a bit about architecture. This building is the Shanghai Financial World Center. So it kind of establishes where we are in this shot. The interesting thing about this building is that when it was being built, the design actually called for a circular opening. But the people in China started protesting against that because they said it looked and reminded them too much of Japan. If you know the history between China and Japan, it's not at best, they're not best of friends. So they changed it to this thing, and now people commonly refer to it as the bottle opener. Yes?
Is that like a barge or a ferry or something?
It's a barge, yeah.
And is that like a standard thing, or that's like someone? Is it like a water taxi, or like it's just?
I think it's just a transportation barge. So I mean, there's a lot of traffic on the river. There's a lot of traffic on the river.
And it doesn't capsize because it looks like you throw a stone next to it and the water's up. It's sink. Yeah.
Right, and then also I try to create images that draws the person to the crowd. So this is in Arashiyama, Japan, where there's this beautiful bamboo grove, and when you see it, you just fall in love with it immediately. Sometimes I look back at some of my landscapes, and it's interesting to see how different, even though the lines are very similar in these two images, but it's really two completely different places. You know, and the colors, everything, even though they're kind of similar, they're so very different. Then we get to food. So, who doesn't like good food photography? I love everything about food. I love to eat food. I love to cook. I love to shoot food. I love to talk about food. So when I travel, I always try to get to markets. To me, markets tell you so much about a place. It tells you about the people. It tells you, if you know what people eat, you know a lot about them. And if I go into a market, and any kind of market, a spice market, wet market like with fish, or a supermarket, even convenience stores, if you go in and you see stuff and it's all familiar, you kind of get a good feel of the place. But if you walk into a market and you see rabbits on sale and pheasant and pig's brains and bull testicles, you know it's going to be an interesting trip. Right? And the people who cook. I always try to sit when I'm traveling, oftentimes I travel alone when I'm doing some of these trips. And I always try to sit next to the bar, because that's where things are happening. And I always talk to the bartenders, talk to the waiters, waitresses, and kind of engage with them. A lot of times these people don't mind you taking shots. Actually, they enjoy it. Just don't get in their way because they're working and stuff moving, and they don't want you to be moving. And then there's the food itself. So again, the food tells us so much about a country and its people and the place that you're visiting. So this is what is called a Kaiseki Dinner in Japan. It's a very formal affair where they use local and seasonal foods. And there's a very strict code of number of courses and how it's supposed to be served and which ones could be fried and some things are steamed and even down to the type of bowls and plates and things that they use is very important. And then I also like to shoot some street. So street is a very kind of general thing that is, kind of, it kind of encompasses all the different things. But to me, shooting these candid street images really kind of helps capture the everyday life of the place that you're at. So it's different from a pose portrait, it's different from architecture and those things that really exemplify a place. But it just kind of gives you a nice slice of what's really happening on the ground. Right, so it could be different kind of images of just walking around the city, taking interesting pictures of things happening. So, what do all these images have in common? It's what I think people refer to as a sense of place. It's that idea of bringing the place to the viewer or carrying the viewer to the place and giving them some little idea of what the experience was like. So what I'll do now, I'll just share a couple of things that I've found for myself, and it's not technical things, it's not about ISO and shutter speeds and all that stuff. It's more about the way of thinking. So the first thing I'd say is be vulnerable. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you're already traveling out of Trinidad, so you're out of your comfort zone. You might be traveling somewhere far, so you're even further out of your comfort zone. You might get there and you don't speak English, so you're still even further out of your comfort zone. That's still or Japanese. So that's why I learned it. Right? So still push yourself. Go beyond what you're comfortable with. Go to the edge of where you're comfortable and step off the edge. You don't have to step off the edge literally like this. But I challenge you to climb that mountain, go on that bike ride that you haven't ridden a bike in 5 years. Do these things and I can assure you the view at the top of the mountain is going to be spectacular. And you'll also learn stuff about yourself doing that. Take pictures of strangers. Every time we ask a stranger to photograph them, we are vulnerable. Because we open ourselves up to rejection, to maybe abuse, who knows what. But I think there's something about taking these pictures that helps you grow in your photography, especially strangers on the road. So this was the back of a restaurant called Flatbread in Portland. And I was walking by and I saw this beautiful wooden shed and these bare kegs and this chair just sitting in the middle there. And I knew if I waited long enough, people from the restaurant, staff from the restaurant would come out to check their phones or sit down for a 5 or smoke a cigarette. And so said, so done. So this is when she was the first person in my studio that evening, and she agreed to let me take a picture. And the interesting thing about asking these strangers to is they are also vulnerable. They don't know who you are. You're just a stranger asking to take the pictures at the back of a restaurant, But there has to be that level of communication, a level of trust, where you could get together and you can actually make a portrait like this. Or sometimes you're walking around and you come across a scene like this, and you're not too sure, should I go and take the picture? Would they quarrel with me? Can I approach them? I'm not too sure. I think the key to some of these things is really to just approach it with respect and humility. And I think the way you move, the way you stand, how far you get, how you close the distance between them, conveys a lot to them. And they will know if they should run you up or if they should allow you to stay and shoot. Sometimes it doesn't always work and you get the evil eye and you have to turn and run. So the other thing I say is to connect with the people. So you meet a lot of people along the way. So this is a guy shot in a restaurant in Maine again, in Portland. I sat at the bar, they said I do, and I was having sushi. I thought he was just a sushi chef, and he turned out to be the owner of the restaurant. And it's not his first restaurant, he actually had a restaurant in New York. And then when I started telling him about I was traveling across the States and I was doing photography and stuff, he told me that he's also an artist, and he does these huge 20-foot, 30-foot installations with these little repeating patterns of keyholes or pigs and all kind of different things. And he's exhibited in Korea and Philadelphia and Maine and New York City. So you never know the stories about the people who you meet along the way. This is Steve. Steve is a person. I stuck my head into this little room here because I was here and walked in. I was like, where's this water coming from? Steve is a lobster fisherman. And all these baskets in the back here are actually live lobsters that they keep in this thing until the restaurants are ready for them. So when you go to the restaurant, you see tank of lobsters. Right? Before they're in those tanks, they store here. This is a guy who owns a camera store. I mean, photographer in a camera store, Can't be more happy than that. Sometimes you don't really even need to talk to the person. We sat there and we talked, him in Japanese and me in English, and I don't think we understood one word that each other was saying, but somehow we were still able to connect. Sometimes you don't even have to talk at all. So this is a couple that I shot at the top after climbing 300 steps to the top of the Sacré-Cœur church in Paris. And we didn't really speak. It was just a shared experience of having to climb. Sorry? Yeah, just to climb those 300 stairs. It was a shared moment of exhaustion, but it was also a shared feeling of joy and happiness of just being in Paris, beautiful summer day, and we didn't speak, we just kind of exchanged glances and took the picture. And you always have to be aware of little things that nature throws at you. I always like how the color of these colors of the graffiti so much, almost closely match the colors of a headscarf and a shades. So those are the things that you kind of look for as well. Sometimes the connections go all deeper. So in 2015, when I started to shoot jab and stick fighting in Trinidad, it got me thinking about indigenous martial arts. And I was planning a trip to Toronto that time, and I thought, hey, let me look up and see if there's any kind of indigenous martial arts in Toronto. And I got onto this guy, George Lepine. George teaches a style of martial arts called Okichitor. And it's a style of martial arts based on the Plains Cree North American Indian tribe. And after we exchanged a few emails, he was like, come on in, feel free to come and shoot. And I've been shooting, been visiting George twice so far, making images of him and his school. It's not really so much necessary travel photography. It kind of spills into a bit of documentary photography, but it still happens when I'm traveling. Always have a plan. So this is one of the things. So I'm an engineer in my whole life, and so I always thinking about flowcharts and spreadsheets and to-do lists and project plans, right? And when I'm planning a trip, it goes into overdrive. I want to know where I'm going to eat, where I'm going to sleep, how far is it going to be from where I'm staying, what do I want to shoot, how am I going to get there, what's it going to cost, how much are tickets. I am really bad when it comes to that.
Oh, exciting.
Right? So that is part of. So it comes down to sometimes it comes down to simple things. So I knew I wanted to shoot these surfers on Jacksonville Beach, and I knew that I didn't want to come during the day when there's people on the beach suntanning and people walking their dogs and people playing hacky sack and volleyball and all those kind of stuff. So I knew I wanted to get that kind of quiet zen moment of the surfers going out to be on the surf. So I knew I had to wake up before the crack of dawn. And if anybody knows me, they know that that's not in my DNA at all. But it was part of something that was part of my plans. I made sure I had to agree to do it. This image, I had seen images like this on the internet, and I knew I wanted to make something similar. I didn't have a plan. I went to Toronto and I said, hey, I'll just walk around and find a few tall buildings and set up and shoot and I'll be done. So after a whole day of not being able to make any images like this, I went back to where I was staying. I talked to my friends and I called up some people I knew, and they told me where to go. So, it's not as easy as just pointing up and getting some buildings, because the buildings actually have to be very close to be able to make an image like this, even with a 20mm lens. So that's part of make sure you have a plan. When I was planning a trip across the States, one of the things I do quite often is if I'm traveling somewhere, I'll look up and see if there are any interesting events that I might like to attend. So I mountain bike, and I noticed that there was a UCI World Cup event going on. So I went on your website and I saw this little link that said, click here for accreditation. So I clicked tonight for accreditation. And 48 hours later, I was fully accredited to come and shoot the event. So I went to the thing, the accreditation gave me full access to the course, full access to all the riders. I got access to a nice media lounge with food and drinks and Wi-Fi and so you never know, right? So plan your trips. Right? And then last one, 2016, I got it in my head I wanted to shoot this solar eclipse because it was happening. Part of it you could see from the US. I thought, hey, all these things are normally in some kind of place like Indonesia or, Sudan or somewhere where it's difficult to get to. And I thought, hey, let me try to make this trip. So, of course, I started planning, trying to figure out how to shoot a solar eclipse because I had no idea what to do. Right? Then I knew I'd have to rent some gear and maybe even buy some gear. And then I was thinking, hey, I want to shoot the solar eclipse, but I don't want to shoot it from the parking lot of the La Quinta hotel that I was staying at. So I found this guy. This guy is Christian Navy. He's the owner of a restaurant in South Carolina where I was shooting from. And he had organized this event for people to come and spend a day and looking at eclipse. And of course, photographers, there were quite a few photographers there as well. So this is Christian making a big, it doesn't look so big, but that was like a 5-foot pie dish that he was making. So he cooked up a bunch of food and we had a good time and then I got to shoot the eclipse. So this is some images that people started to look at the eclipse. This is actually my mom, so you saw in the first picture. So now the shoes have reversed and now I take her on trips. And then this is kind of what we started to see. And that was the image that I had in my mind that I wanted to get when I started planning. So always have a plan, but don't always follow your plan, right? Because there's these things that happen and things change, there's opportunities that happen, there's this word serendipity, things happen, right? You never know. It's always good to be open to it. So I always say, have a plan, but you don't always have to drive in. So a trip across the States, I was driving along the I-84 and I saw this steeple in the distance along the Dalles near to the Hood River. I said, hey, that looks like an interesting church. Let me pull off the highway and see if I can make some images. So I walked in, taking some images, and I was about to leave, and then I met this woman, Carolyn Homer. So Carolyn started to give me some of the history of the church. So the church was actually part of the Catholic Church, and a few years ago they built a new church and they're actually going to destroy that church. And there was a whole bunch of history of people saying, people got together and they were like, oh, you can't destroy church, you have to save the church. So they actually put together money and they bought the church. Wow. So the church is now private property, but they still use it for ceremonies and different kind of things. And Carolyn was one of those people from 1979 who was part of the movement. And she's now like a custodian person who stays in the church and does different things. So Carol, it was just me and Carol in the church. She invited me upstairs to go and hear her play the organ. So I did that. She took me in the back to see the church's collection of holy water fonts. Right? So, I mean, I've never seen a collection of holy water fonts. I don't know if it's the only one in the world, but right? But then being with her and have just kind of not following that plan, it allowed me to get some images that I would not have normally been able to get. So just from a different perspective, I was able to create something out of it. Or this time when I was in the south of France, and I was having lunch, me and my friends, and we saw the other table next to us, and I asked him, hey, what's that those people drinking here? And he came back. The next thing I see him come back with a tray of drinks of the same thing. He's like, oh, they bought these drinks for you. So of course, so I crossed and talked to them. So this is Omar and his family. So Omar is from Tunisia, and every day, as a rule, he gets together with his family for lunch, and they in this lovely plaza in the middle of town, and they have lunch together, and then they go off their separate ways. So when Omar found out I was a photographer, he said, hey, I want to carry you somewhere to take some pictures. So this was a place that was an old ruins that was closed off that day, but of course Omar living there, he knew who to call or whatever to get the keys, and we got it. So again, it was just me, Omar, and some of my friends. It was a beautiful garden, and I was able to make some of these images. So again, don't always follow your plan. So this is a really important one. Let your images try to tell a story. And the story could be anything. And it doesn't have to be a whole big, long, complicated story. It's just a very simple story. So like food, right? So if you've ever been to dim sum, these little steamer baskets And you know the excitement and the anticipation of when they were rolling around the baskets and you're waiting to see what's coming. Or it could just be a funny sign that you see. And it makes you realize that people are the same everywhere in the world. Right? So it's strictly forbidden to sit on the steps. Right? Or again, food. Right? So I told you I love food. So it's just some people walk into a restaurant with a whole side of roast pig, and you know, so that's where it's come from. They get a little box. That's what it is before that. Or it could be just going out on an adventure, you know, nice calm lake. You could almost hear the silence in this picture. The water is so calm. All you hear is the paddles and water dripping off your paddles, and the breeze blowing through the valley. Or it could be a picture of two people falling in love on the cafes in Paris. You know, so it doesn't take much, but it tells you right away. You know what this story is about. I'm still waiting for Coca-Cola to call me to buy out this picture. If anybody has any contacts, let me know. Or sometimes the story needs more than one picture. So when I was in Japan, my friend Yukio happened to be there, and he introduced me to his friend Kazuo, who, after we drank a whole lot of sushi, sake, at this guy's restaurant, Kazuo said, "Hey, let me take you to Tsukiji Market." Because he turns out he used to work at Tsukiji Market a few years before. So if you don't know, Tsukiji Market was one of the biggest fish markets in the world. So this is when you hear about those auctions that they auctioned off for tuna for $1 million, this is where it used to happen. Right? So with Kazuo's help, we walked around, we got access to some things that I don't think we normally would have been able to see. And he was also able to explain some of the stuff that was happening, because if you go on, you're just seeing stuff you don't know what it is. So this is something called ikijimi, which is a technique that they use to kill the fish. And they say it's a more humane technique, and it helps to preserve the meat better for sushi and sashimi. And these guys know about fish. So, and then seeing these guys cutting up fish with these long sword-like things, and it's real easy to think, you know, these are descendants of samurai. You know. So open your heart, mind, and eye. Sometimes things just kind of fall into place. You have to be in that mindset where you're looking for it, actively walking around trying to see these things. So once you see them, your mind has to click and go, hey, this is an interesting thing. And at the same time, you have to go into that mode of shutter speed, aperture, ISO, where should I stand, composition, how far, how close I need to walk. Sometimes they happen really fast. You know, if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss it. Sometimes it's just beautiful light that you want to kind of capture. Sometimes what you see is very subtle, and you have to look carefully to really see what's the treasure in the picture. Sometimes everything falls into their own little boxes perfectly. And sometimes the people that walk into your frame, they couldn't be any more perfect. Right, so I'll end now just to tell you something that I learned from a friend and a mentor, Peter Tinley. The great French photographer Edouard Bouvard told him, and now I'm telling you, he said, if you keep your eye and your heart open, there's a gift waiting for you in front of every street. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chad. Anybody has questions for Chad?
Yeah.
I want to carry his bag.
Okay. Right. So
That's right answer.
making the connection. I
Yes.
think for me that is the slide that stood out the most.
Right.
Because in every story you brought here, it is underpinned by you making that connection either viscerally or verbally with somebody. How do you break the ice?
You just, you know, I mean, when you first start off, is your natural thing is to snipe people from across the road with a 300mm lens. And you have to go through that part, that's part of the natural learning process, I think. But there's no easy way. The easy way is just go up to somebody and say, hey, you mind if I take a picture? And realizing that there's two outcomes. One, they could say yes, or two, they could say no. And if they say no, it's not a rejection of you. It's just they don't want to have their picture taken for whatever reason. And we get tied up. When the person say no, we start, oh God, you know, you kind of feel like it's something that you did. and some, you know, hopefully we go, yes, and you run away. But it's not. And it's been my experience that 7, 8 times out of 10, people would say, yeah, sure. The biggest question is what you're going to do with the picture. And if you explain to them, hey, I'm just a photographer, I'm traveling around, I love taking pictures, you look so, I love how you're sitting down here and the light falling on your face, so, I saw you playing with your phone and it looks so funny. Whatever, I mean, there's something that draws you to want to take the picture of that person. And just be honest. And say, hey, and if they say no, say, oh, no problem, have a nice day. And sometimes it happens, sometimes it does not. Don't take it on.
You work with 2 cameras or black and white?
No, most of the black and white you saw would have been conversions. I mean, you could have a whole other discussion on gear to take when you're traveling.
And that's seeing what you're talking about. Like, I love all of that because I love travels, I love all those photos. But I always like, for me personally, like I get upset if I go to a function and people take pictures. Like I would ask people, oh, these are the pictures, can I post it or whatever? So I always wonder, like, and people say, yes, take my picture. But I think you just taking a picture, but then everybody around the world sees it. So, I mean, like, in terms of privacy and, like, displaying, especially those portraits, like, it's a crowd of people, but, like, personal portraits, is there anything that stops you from, like, displaying it? Or do you have to get, I mean, at some point, this person, like, travel somewhere and see their photo widely displayed somewhere. Do they have is there any repercussions in terms of taking photos like that?
So, well, first of all, I'm not a lawyer. Right? So, what I understand, and it's interesting, we actually have a IP and copyright thing coming up, so, but my understanding is that if you're in the public domain, I could take your picture. Where it starts to get iffy, I mean, of course, my policy is if anything I have up on my website or my social media and somebody, any pictures ask me to take it down, I'll take it. But my understanding is everything is okay until you cross into the realm of commercializing. So if I take one of those images and say Coke wants to buy my image and say they're going to use it for the next campaign,
that's what I was thinking about.
Then I have a lot of trouble, right? So I'll have to go find those people and get their express permission to be able to use it. But I think if I use it on my website, if I use it on my social media, most times it doesn't cause a problem. And the world is big, unless I'm really lucky to get a big contract. I mean, the odds of any of these people seeing my work again is pretty small. And then also to one of the important things I forgot to mention, you take pictures of people and you promise to send a copy to them. Please do.
Yes.
Right? And you always have the best intention. When you get back home, your life gets back up with you and you haven't this process, and that list of names with people who have to do gets lost somewhere and you don't send it to them. And it spoils it for the rest of photographers who come along afterwards and try to get pictures, and they're like, nah, people's always come and take my pictures, and they never get it. So please, if you say you're going to do it, do it. And especially in this time where you just have to click and you get minutes, you don't have to worry about printing and mailing and stamping.
But what struck me, Chad, is that you were able to sort of name a lot of the people in your images, which means that you have some level of a relationship with them, a discussion, enough to know their name and to know who they were, what they were doing. So I think that is also a helpful element when they are aware that you have taken their shots and you get their name and
well, a lot of that comes from promising to take the pictures. So I always have a notebook on me. I have my phone, but I find it's always quicker to scribble it on a notebook. And yeah, it's from promising to take pictures of people. So you send photos to people that I have so much of the information, and it's easy for me. A lot of times I'll remember, but it's easy for me just to go back and say, hey, what was the name of that person in the restaurant again? But that's what I talk about in age. If I just came up there and just snuck your picture and walked away, I don't know what's your story. You're just an interesting person in some nice fluorescent light. Yes?
Chad, it's interesting what you're saying. At the Pan Safari we had, I went up and asked somebody in one of the booths if I could take a picture. it was a purple background, and she was a striking woman, and she was lovely. And she said, last year I would have said yes, but I had my picture taken by someone last year. I ended up in one of the flight magazines.
Wow.
I said, you know, I do not like that. You should tell your fellow photographers. That really hurt my feelings. And now I'm going to say no to you. I don't want my picture taken and used like that again without me having any rights. So you can end up really, really upsetting people.
Good point.
I think it's right to talk to people directly and say, you know, I would like to take a shot, you know, like the object, and generally when people respond, it's okay. So, you have a question.
I'd like to add to that to say, also let them know or to get permission from them one time probably for posting and something like that. But what I really wanted to ask, first I want to state that I love travel photography, especially for landscapes. I love landscape photography, and there are many things that you can capture right here in Trinidad, but most of the really amazing stuff, not necessarily the iconic shots, but there are really beautiful landscapes in different parts of the world. So I wanted to know, one, if you do this, because
Sound like a hard question.
I don't know you too well.
Uh-huh.
I am new to this whole thing, so I want to know if you do this occasionally in terms of traveling and taking photos, or if it's more on the full-time side of life. And if it is full-time, or even with it being part-time, how do you sustain that?
Right.
Financially,
So all these
especially.
images you saw here were personal projects. So I'm not a commercial travel photographer, and I am a full-time photographer. So I'm not a travel photographer. So most of the work I do is in doing commercial photography. So with clients trying to sell stuff.